Fresh off their first ever Super Bowl title, the 2014 Seattle Seahawks found themselves flirting with Dynasty status. Propelled by a legendary defense, a dynamic young quarterback, and an unstoppable running game, the Seahawks ran roughshod over the league for a second year in a row, and they waltzed into Super Bowl 49, poised to not only cement their status as a bona fide dynasty, but to definitively end another one in the process. However, thanks to a mystifying play call in the dying moments of the fourth quarter, the Seahawks' bid for all-time juggernaut status was emphatically denied. Instead, the Seahawks entered the football annals in far less flattering fashion, for committing one of the most agonizing turnovers in Super Bowl history. A play that not only resuscitated the New England Patriots' dormant dynasty, but one that kickstarted the slow unraveling of a Seattle powerhouse. As the Seahawks rejoiced at MetLife Stadium after decimating Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 48, it seemed like no franchise had a brighter future than Seattle. Under the trusted leadership of veteran head coach Pete Carroll, the resurgent Seahawks tied a franchise record with 13 wins in 2013, finally reached football's mountaintop, and just a half-decade removed from one of the worst seasons in team history, boasted a talented young roster with no discernible weaknesses. Their impregnable defense, led by a star-studded secondary known affectionately as the Legion of Boom, had just allowed the fewest points in the league for a second straight year, and each of their core LOB members, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Byron Maxwell, was still 26 or younger. Meanwhile, less than 2 years after going in the third round of the NFL draft, Russell Wilson had established himself as one of the game's premier quarterbacks thanks to his mobility and smarts. And Marshawn Lynch, their enigmatic running back who had gone full beast mode and earned a trip to the Pro Bowl in each of his 3 full seasons in Seattle, still had multiple years remaining on his contract. Not surprisingly, the Seahawks headed into the 2014 campaign as the prohibitive Super Bowl favorites. Yet, as solid as they were on both sides of the ball, the Seahawks' title defense actually got off to a shaky start. 7 weeks into the season, the defending champs were stuck at 500, had already matched their loss total from 2013, and their vaunted defense was getting pushed around. Their Super Bowl hangover was a doozy, and after the Seahawks surrendered 28 points in a Week 7 loss to the lowly St. Louis Rams, fans and pundits started wondering if Seattle's dynasty potential had been overstated. Those doubts vanished pretty quickly, though. Seemingly galvanized by their embarrassing loss to the Rams, the Seahawks were an entirely different team from Week 8 onward, a behemoth and defensive stalwart that looked every bit as dominant as they had the year prior. They followed up that defeat with 3 straight victories, allowing less than 17 points per game on average while forcing 7 turnovers to get their season back on track. Meanwhile, their offense found its footing too. Between Wilson's increasingly effective scrambling and Lynch's explosiveness, the Seahawks were virtually impossible to contain on the ground. Over that 3-game winning streak, Lynch scored 6 touchdowns and averaged 4.8 yards per carry, while Wilson averaged nearly 58 rushing yards per game himself. And the Seahawks were just getting warmed up. After allowing 24 points in a Week 11 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Seahawks defense was practically impossible to score on. Over the next 2 games, Seattle allowed 6 points total. The Seahawks held the Arizona Cardinals to a field goal in a critical Week 12 victory over their foremost division rival, then did the same the following week to the San Francisco 49ers to improve to 8-4. And they just kept on chugging. Over their final 4 regular season games, the Seahawks defense allowed double-digit points just once, while their offense averaged nearly 185 rushing yards per contest. Across that crucial home stretch, the Seahawks outscored their opponents 96-33. Needless to say, the Seahawks won each of those contests, finishing 12-4 to lock up a second straight NFC West Division title and the number 1 seed in the conference, and ultimately reassert themselves as a burgeoning dynasty. For the 3rd year in a row, the Seahawks defense had allowed the fewest points in the league. They had also surrendered the fewest yards in the NFL for a second straight season. Meanwhile, no offense even came close to racking up as many rushing yards as the Seahawks did in 2014, and their 20 rushing touchdowns were also a league best. By all accounts, they seem primed to become the league's first repeat champs since the 03-04 Patriots. And after spanking the Carolina Panthers in the divisional round before squeaking past the Green Bay Packers to repeat as conference champs, the only thing that stood between the Seahawks and full-fledged dynasty status was the Patriots, a still dominant powerhouse that had nevertheless gone nearly a decade without winning a Super Bowl. The Patriots, led by the incomparable duo of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, had come close many times during that drought, but each near miss ostensibly reinforced that New England's best days were behind them. Ultimately, despite their pedigree, world-class offense, and league-best point differential, the Patriots opened as 2.5-point underdogs in Super Bowl 49. That's how indomitable the Seahawks looked. In any event, the matchup promised to be one for the ages. A prospective dynasty looking to cement their place in history, with the modern era's preeminent powerhouse standing in their way? That's as juicy as it gets. It's no surprise that Super Bowl 49 remains the most watched broadcast in American history as of 2022. And with an unprecedented number of eyeballs glued to their TVs, the two Titans delivered. After a scoreless first quarter, the Patriots drew first blood when Brady connected with Brandon LaFell on an 11-yard touchdown pass. The Seahawks responded, with Lynch punching one in from 3 yards out ahead of the 2-minute warning. Just over 90 seconds later, though, Brady restored his team's lead, hooking up with Rob Gronkowski in single coverage. Not to be outdone, Wilson marched his team deep into enemy territory in the dying seconds of the half and promptly hit rookie Chris Matthews in the end zone to knot things up ahead of Katy Perry's performance. At that point, the Seahawks took control. Relying heavily on Lynch, the Seahawks drove all the way to New England's 8-yard line on the first possession of the second half before settling for a field goal. Wilson didn't have to wait long to get the ball back, though, as Bobby Wagner picked Brady off on the ensuing possession.
Play clock at 1. Brady over the middle, and it's picked off at the 42-yard line by Bobby Wagner. Second interception.
Minutes later, Wilson extended Seattle's lead to 10 with a touchdown pass to Doug Baldwin. And as the third quarter bled into the fourth, the Seahawks' lead remained. The Legion of Boom flummoxed Brady, and Seattle's offense did its best to eat up the clock. But Brady is the GOAT for a reason. Just ahead of the halfway point in the fourth, Brady capped a 4+ minute drive with a short touchdown pass to Danny Amendola, cutting his team's deficit to 3. And after a quick 3-and-out from the Seahawks, Brady did it again, orchestrating another lengthy drive that ended with a Julian Edelman touchdown and a 4-point Patriots lead with 2:02 on the clock. This was it, the 2-minute drill that would either cement the Seahawks as a dynasty or relegate them to the crowded bin of champs who couldn't quite find a way to repeat. It started off promisingly enough. On the first play from scrimmage, Wilson connected with Lynch on a 31-yard pass. 4 plays later, after a clutch third-down conversion, Jermaine Kearse made a circus catch that put Seattle on New England's 5-yard line, an impossible grab that would have been celebrated and remembered like David Tyree's iconic Super Bowl catch had things shaken out differently. But after Lynch burrowed his way to New England's 1-yard line on the following play, Carroll made the fateful play call that upended Seattle's comeback, a gambit that will forever be his defining moment as a head coach. Facing second and goal from the 1-yard line with a timeout in hand, everyone on the planet knew the Seahawks were going to hand the ball to Lynch, the backbone of their league-best rushing offense, and a wrecking ball who had already racked up 102 yards on the ground and a touchdown. It wasn't the obvious call. It was the only call. Just not to Carroll. Rather than give Beast Mode a chance to punch in a go-ahead touchdown, Carroll called for a pass play. The rest is history.
On his mind, it has to be. Do you bleed the clock all the way down? They're bleeding it right down to half a minute. Second and goal. Baldwin sets up on the left. Play clock at 5. Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Malcolm Butler, who almost made the phenomenal play that wound up in Kearse's arms. There are flags on the field for a celebration. Amazing.
You'll likely go the rest of your life without seeing a more questionable or more scrutinized play call. The one that launched more takes than Stephen A. Smith could spout off in a lifetime and inspired a whole lot of second guessing even on Seattle's sideline.
You know, the pick, damn, I come off the sideline and in my mind I'm confused and I'm walking by Pete. I'm just laughing at him like, bro, what the?
The call was so stunningly counterintuitive and monumentally costly that even the Today Show had to sit Carroll down afterward and ask him what on earth he was thinking.
You've heard the experts, not just average Joes, say it was the worst call ever. It was the worst result of a call ever. The call would have been a great one if we catch it. It would have been just fine and nobody would have thought twice about it.
On top of cementing Carroll's dubious place in football's annals, the play call also led to some of the most enduring imagery in recent football history. Sherman's pained, contorting face is unforgettable. Same goes for Lynch's burst of laughter and Brady's exultation. In the immediate aftermath of the game, though, both Carroll and Wilson took responsibility for the loss, and both men were tortured by that play call and interception for a long time. And how could they not be? They were literally inches away from solidifying the Seahawks dynasty. Instead, they breathed new life into New England's. With their improbable victory in Super Bowl 49, the Patriots kicked off the glorious second act of the Brady-Belichick era. After going 9 straight years without hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, the Patriots won 3 Super Bowls in a 5-year span, giving Brady and Belichick 6 championship seasons together. Malcolm Butler, by the way, ended up spending 4 seasons in New England, earning himself a pair of Super Bowl rings and eventually a spot on the franchise's all-decade team for the 2010s. As for the Seahawks, their agonizing defeat marked the beginning of a gradual decline for the franchise, which remained competitive for years afterwards, but never seriously threatened for another championship. In 2015, after losing Maxwell to free agency, the Seahawks settled for a wildcard berth before getting bested in the divisional round. At season's end, Lynch, who had missed much of the year with a sports hernia, retired. Sort of. The Seahawks reclaimed the NFC West in 2016, but once again they were ousted in the divisional round, this time at the hands of the Atlanta Falcons, who would themselves go on to lose to the Patriots in the Super Bowl in spectacular fashion. And the Legion of Boom dissolved quickly from there. Chancellor played only 9 games in 2017 due to a neck injury that ultimately ended his career at the age of 29. Sherman, the Legion's vocal leader, was also limited to 9 games in 2017 due to injury and was released at season's end. Thomas, the last remaining original LOB member, played his final game for the Seahawks in 2018. Quickly, Seattle managed to carve out a new identity, one based around their high-octane passing game, but the new-look Seahawks weren't able to get back to the promised land either. The Seahawks won no fewer than 10 games per season from 2018 through 2020 and made it to the postseason each year, but Seattle won exactly 1 playoff game over that span. And after stumbling through a 7-10 campaign in 2021 with 33-year-old Wilson under center, the Seahawks officially parted ways with their longtime quarterback, trading him to Denver and officially closing one of the most memorable chapters in franchise history. And it was a glorious chapter, one filled with epic highs and year-in, year-out competitiveness. Rightly or wrongly though, the Legion of Boom Seahawks will be best remembered for their lowest low, that regrettable play call that turned them from an emergent dynasty into just another one-off champ. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.